How did you sleep last night? I actually slept really well last night. Not so great on Saturday, but I did sleep really, really well last night. And what I wanted to chat about in today's episode was how sleep might be affecting your fertility. And it might be one of those things you might be overlooking. You might be looking at nutrition. You might be looking at lifestyle in general, caffeine, alcohol, and bits and pieces, stress management, mindset, all of the things that I talk about. But how is your sleep, and could sleep be affecting your fertility? So I hope you enjoy the episode. And as usual, if you've got any questions, just drop me a line. Hello and welcome to the Fertility Rewire podcast, a place for information and discussion around topics relevant to fertility. I'm your host, Kat Stevens. I'm a fertility coach and founder of the Fertility Rewire program. And I'm passionate about people being given sufficient information to enhance their own fertility awareness. Today's podcast is about sleep, and more specifically, how sleep affects your fertility. Now, we often think, don't we, about nutrition and lifestyle issues, of alcohol and caffeine. But do you really stop to think about how sleep might be affecting your fertility? So how is your sleep? First of all, I need quite a bit of sleep, I'll be honest. And if my sleep is disturbed, then it massively affects me the next day. Part of that is due to a health condition where I do get effects from fatigue on occasions. And if I'm tired, then this can compound things a little bit further. But I generally like to have about 8 to 9 hours sleep a night. And if I have less than 8, then I do notice the effects. You know, I tend to get quite groggy. My cognition is a bit affected. I'm a bit slower making decisions and kind of feel a bit jet lagged, really. So when I worked as a nurse, I used to work shifts and I could pretty much sleep anywhere at any time. As long as I'm tired, I could just go to sleep anywhere. My mum used to say that I could sleep on a washing line. So this lack of sleep can, as I said, make you feel groggy, almost jet lagged. And we head into something called sleep debt. So we're trying to catch up on this sleep, which isn't always possible in fairness. So if we take a step back and look at sleep and think about what the function of sleep is. Now, it's not a time when everything just shuts down. And I wrote about this in the blog a few weeks ago now. It's actually a time when the brain is very, very busy processing information, getting everything in place and in line and sorting things out from the day, if you like. And there's a great book by a chap called Dr. Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. And what's great about the book is that it provides you with the science that explains all of this information that as I've said many times, you may look upon as a little bit woo. And I do like to find the science behind the woo. But a good night's sleep is vitally important. And it becomes quite an egotistical thing that people say they can function on such little sleep, but actually they might be doing detriment to their body. Now, I know there was some research recently and there's a suggestion that there is something called, I think they call it the Thatcher gene, was Margaret Thatcher famously said, I think she managed on 2 to 3 hours sleep a night, where some people can manage perfectly well on this limited amount of sleep. But I do wonder if their brain actually is processing as it should do. And more importantly for fertility, if the hormone balance that needs to occur during sleep is actually happening. Now, when we look at the effects of poor sleep, there's some quite physical issues that can happen. So it can become quite difficult to lose weight, and there can be a higher risk of diabetes. Now, this is because of the glucose effects overnight and the balancing that needs to happen. Also, when you have a lack of sleep, your body enters into a survival mode, only concentrating on the absolute vital and it's conserving energy. When you are sleep deprived if you're trying to lose weight, you're more likely to lose muscle mass because your body is conserving the fat because it's in survival mode and it thinks it might need it. You also find that people with sleep deprivation are more at risk of decreased immunity, and we know that immunity can have an effect on fertility as well. Also, there can be a decrease in natural cancer-fighting cells. Your likelihood to injury is increased, and it also limits recovery. You can also have a low sex drive as a result of sleep deprivation. So that's not great for fertility either. We know that if you are enjoying sex when you're trying to conceive, that the hormones at play can make fertility more likely. There's a negative effect on exercise and performance, and it also affects your mental well-being. And when you're on a fertility journey, your mental well-being can be quite affected anyway, with low mood or high stress or increased anxiety. So that lack of sleep can affect it. But that becomes a vicious circle as well, of course, because if you are experiencing anxiety or low mood or depression, that can actually affect your sleep and therefore reduce your sleep length, but your quality of sleep even further. And the quality of sleep is massively important. It's not just the number of hours, it's how you are sleeping, whether you're getting the sleep in the right phases. So there's a decreased life expectancy in people with sleep deprivation, increased risk of heart attack, and also we know that it has effects on fertility. This can be a big thing for people who are working shifts, and it's important if you are a shift worker, it's something that you need to look into a little bit and make sure that you are getting sleep and you are getting good quality of sleep, and looking into those work, sleep, life patterns really. Now, in particular to fertility, I've touched upon a few things, but there has been some research that's shown that women undergoing IVF have had an increased number of eggs collected if they've slept for over 7 hours a night. And it also showed actually that if they had too much sleep, this could reduce the number of eggs. And in the similar studies showed that women who get less than 7 hours sleep were 15% less likely to get pregnant. So that's looking from an IVF perspective, but we know that there can be similarities there, of course. With natural fertility, it's just a little bit more measurable with the IVF and the number of eggs and so on. When you look at male fertility, sleep can be a big factor as well. And there was a study in Denmark that showed that sperm count and the health of the sperm is also affected by a lack of sleep, with up to a 25% reduction in sperm count, and also a reduction in testosterone levels. And we know that this is massively important for sperm and sperm health. So again, we're going into a survival mode and everything's being shut down. And this is really, really important when we come to look at fertility. And in the Fertility Rewire model, when we look at safety, a lack of sleep has an effect on this perception of safety in the body as well. Now, one of the areas that has been looked at as well, and you may have heard about luteinizing hormone. When you ovulate, for ovulation to happen, there is a surge in luteinizing hormone, and then ovulation happens. And when we look at this specific to sleep, it can be affected by what's called your sleep-wake cycle. So this refers to a 24-hour daily sleep pattern. You might look at it as your biological clock, it's called as well, but it looks at things called circadian rhythms. But in particular, what we're focusing on is this sleep-wake cycle. And a lack of sleep has been shown to specifically affect the luteinizing hormone surge. So if you have poor sleep around ovulation, it may be crucial that actually affects the strength of ovulation, or whether ovulation happens at all. So reduced sleep, shift work, travelling through time zones, if you're travelling long haul around this time, this can all affect ovulation. So have a think about what your sleep is like and have a think about how you might be able to improve your sleep. We know that if you're on phones or tablets or computer screens before bedtime, this can affect your sleep using the blue screen. So it's really important to limit that before bed. Some great research around caffeine and how actually caffeine effect is in your body and affects you for a lot longer than you might realize. It's got a quarter life of 12 hours. So if you have a drink of coffee at 11 o'clock in the morning, that's still in your body. It's leaving your body at 11 o'clock at night. So that's a massive deal as well. So that's important. We know that caffeine can affect sperm health as well, and also is linked to fertility in women. So really, really important to just have a think about your caffeine. So you need to get a good sleep routine, get into a good sleep routine. And one of the things that I recommend for quite a lot of my clients actually is to use apps on phones. Now, that then becomes a bit tricky because I've just said, don't be looking at your phone. So obviously you switch the app on and you put it away from your head, as far as you can and still hear it. But I've tried, as I said, I don't really have a problem with sleeping unless I'm in a different bed, and then I really struggle. And if there's noise, because I live in a really quiet area. So actually, I guess the only reason I don't have trouble with sleep is because I live somewhere really quiet, and I have a really comfy bed. So I might go back on that. I do actually get massively affected with sleep disturbance when I'm away from home, but it takes me a couple of days to settle into it, which is quite normal in honesty for a lot of people. And this throws up an issue if you're traveling with work. It might be an issue staying in hotels. So get yourself a good sleep routine. I use a pure therapeutic essential oil if I'm just feeling that maybe my sleep might be affected. I don't use it every night. I listen to the app. I was just starting to talk about apps, and then I got distracted. Sometimes I've listened to the app Calm and the sleep stories on there. If you're really having trouble switching off, just listening to the sleep stories is really good. And I particularly like the one that Stephen Fry does about lavender. And it's just spoken in such a way. There's no change in voice. There's no lift or drop or excitement as they speak. And it's really powerful. Great for children as well. And who doesn't like a bedtime story? We've always liked a bedtime story, haven't we? And my children still do very much. Have a think, really, about sleep. I just wanted to provoke some thoughts in you, really, about your sleep. There's lots of things you might be thinking about fertility, but don't overlook sleep and how vitally important sleep is. And if you need any advice or any information about sleep, about essential oils, about some mindfulness patterns, or even visualizations, and this is all part of what I do within my coaching program. And if you wanted to get in touch, perhaps arrange just a quick chat, then please do. Information about how to find me is at the end of the podcast. But I hope you sleep really well tonight. Take care. Bye. You've been listening to the Fertility Rewire podcast with me, Kat Stevens. If you wanted to find any further details, then you can check out the website, fertilityrewire.com, or find me on Instagram or Facebook or Pinterest at Fertility Rewire.